I'd like to call the meeting to order. This being the monthly meeting of the Calaveras County Planning Commission for September the 10th. The first order of business, if you'd all join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. The flag is over here. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Let the record show that the Planning Commission is all here except for the chairman, who lives in McKelvey Hill, so it's understandable that she might be busy. Are there any agenda changes?
No, there are not. Note that item 1E1 will be continued to October 8th. We have not received the information yet from the project proponent on that in order to complete the review that you guys directed us to do a few weeks ago, but you will need to take formal action to continue it with the time that this comes up on the agenda. There was some discussion earlier in the week or late last week about possibly continuing item E4, the review of the background report, technical background report of the general plan. And I don't know if you want to decide to continue that now to pull off the calendar, or wait until we get to that item.
I'm sorry, what's the question again?
Whether or not to continue the discussion, the review of the technical background report. You guys received it maybe on Friday and maybe on Tuesday, depending on whether you picked up your mail over the holiday weekend. So I don't know if you had enough time to review the information. There was some discussion that I had with individual commission members about possibly continuing. I don't know what your desire is at this point. But if you want to continue it, you might make that determination now so that people in the audience here for that item can know that they don't have to hang out, stay around.
Right now, it's on the calendar for next week.
No, it's today.
But we had a discussion about that. Did you not, that we were in agreement to, I haven't received it.
The technical background report?
No. I came in to pick it up on Tuesday, like I said I would, but it had been mailed, and it hasn't gotten to me.
Okay. So I guess that's the question. Do you, because we would need to continue that. It's on today's agenda.
For me, I would have to suggest that we continue it, but I thought that was kind of the consensus.
I'll make a motion that we continue.
I'll second the motion.
It's been moved and seconded to continue that item until the next meeting?
And the next meeting being next week, the special meeting to review the general plan. Or do you want to continue it for 2 weeks to our regularly scheduled meeting on the 22nd, I believe it is?
I believe next week we were contemplating tackling the background report and diving into the land use element.
The land use element is not ready.
Oh.
I'm still wading through all of the public comments. It's taking a lot longer than I anticipated.
Okay, in that case, what, in addition to the background report, would be on next week's agenda?
That would be the only thing.
That's about a 2-pounder. It's a pretty.
Yeah, it's yeah. So maybe that's just, then my second still stands that we continue until next week, and even if that's the only item on the agenda.
They moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it.
And
4-0, 1 absent.
And Mr. Maurer, you mentioned that we also have to have a motion with respect to item 1.
I think we should take that up when that item comes up on the agenda. So when we complete the public comment period and consent agenda, we get to that item.
We'll be there shortly.
We'll be there shortly, yes.
On the background report, you had indicated in one of the emails that it was in that we would get the maps when we got here for that? That they would not print in proper size? You were having issues?
We were going to talk about it today. Who would like the larger maps?
We can print those out. We haven't done that yet because we want to make sure that, before we print a bunch of things that, if you're looking at them online, you can see them fine. Somehow when we printed them off, they printed on 8.5 by 11 rather than the 11 by 17 that it was intended to. We can reprint those maps if you'd like them.
How many maps are there? Is it the general plan map?
It is the various maps contained in the background report. There are 63 exhibits. Most of those, or many of those, are larger format so that they're more visible in the printed form.
Because there was quite a few comments on those maps that came through to us, I think it's a good idea that we have them and at least be able to look at them to see what the comments are
Okay.
referencing.
So we will print those up then at the end of the meeting and get them to you as quickly as we can.
So these will be 11 by 17.
Yes.
Have they changed since the December 14?
There have been a handful that have changed, and maybe that's a better way, is just to print up the ones that we actually replaced or modified, because you have
Yep.
the original set, which, if there's anything new, so we'll do that, and we'll get the changed ones to you. You can pull it off from the original set that went out in last December. Those have not changed, unless it would be easier for you just to have a complete set.
I've got my original ones, so if I could just get the ones with the changes, I'd be happy.
Okay.
Where would you have gotten the original ones?
In the general plan report that was sent to all of us, with all the elements in it.
You received a copy of the initial draft technical background
Yeah.
report in December,
It's all in there.
and all of those maps were in that. There have been a handful of maps that changed. We updated some of them with new information. Some of them were less legible, and we replaced those with more legible copies.
For my copies, if you would just hold them in the department, and I'll come by and make sure that I've got a full set,
Okay,
new and old.
all right, we can do that.
Don't mail.
Thank you.
Okay, the first item of business will be public comments. This is the time for anybody in the audience who would like to address the Planning Commission on an item that is not on today's agenda. If you are here to discuss something that's on today's agenda, you'll have that opportunity when it comes up. So, anybody have anything that's not on today's agenda they'd like to bring up? Any land use items? There being none, the next item of business is the consent agenda, which would be the minutes of our last meeting.
There's nothing on the consent.
Pardon?
There's nothing on the consent today.
Nothing, okay. Moving right along then to our first public hearing. And that's the one that you were just mentioning was not through?
Yes, this is the continued hearing on the appeal 215-029, the environmental health officer's determination that there would be significant impact on the environment. You had directed the health officer to go back and look at some additional information. We needed to have information from the applicant in order to do that additional review. They're still developing some of that information, some of the air quality requirements that need to be met. We expect to have that shortly, and we're recommending that this item be continued to October 8th.
How confident are we about October 8th?
Confident.
In that case, I'll make the motion to continue the matter until October 8th.
I think you need to open up public hearing. Well, you can make the motion, and then, but you do need to have a public comment on whether to continue or not.
We can have public comment after the motion.
Yes, you can.
Okay, the motion stands.
Okay,
You probably need a second for the motion.
I'll second.
Okay.
it's moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Wait, yeah, you need to open
Public
up public hearing first.
Oh, okay, good.
It's on the agenda, so the public has the right to
Right.
comment. So.
Okay, this hearing then is on 2015-129, or 029D, appeal of Environmental Management Agency's determinations pursuant to Calaveras County Code Sections 17.42.35 that the proposed asphalt plant at Hogan Quarry will involve the use of hazardous material that may have a significant effect on the environment. Planning directors determined that the Environmental Management Agency's determination triggers a requirement for a conditional use permit. Appeal by Ford Construction and CB Asphalt of the Environmental Management Agency's determination that installation and operation of a hot mix asphalt plant at Hogan Quarry, 3650 Hogan Dam Road, Valley Springs, assessor parcel number 050-003-001 will involve the use of hazardous materials that may have a significant effect on the environment, and therefore requires a conditional use permit pursuant to Calaveras County Code 17.42.035. So we'll open the public hearing. You have some comments before?
No.
Okay. Then we'll open the public hearing. Is there anyone in the public who would like to comment on this? Because this might be your chance.
Good morning, Vicki Reinke, Calaveras County Republicans. Of course, we were hoping that we were going to see the appeal today for this final hearing. It was postponed 4 weeks ago to September 10th, so we were, hoping that that would be on this agenda today. And I see that it has been postponed till October 8th, which I guess that's the way that is. And we certainly hope that this is not a delay tactic by our county, part of the Environmental Management Agency, just to delay this project. This is an asphalt plant. We know we have many, many asphalt plants in the state of California. They've been around forever. They've just gotten better in their regulation. It's, like I've said 100 times, the EPA has taken them off an endangered health hazard list. So I don't know what it is that's keeping this delayed. It just seems county policy as usual. Let's make it hard for anybody to come to this county to start a business, to get a business going. So I hope that on October 8th, there is some very valid reasons why this is still being considered a hazardous material coming into the county. And we also know that asphalt plants are already heavily regulated, and the plant that's being built here is a new plant. It's has a lot of built-in precautions for any kind of a spill, etc. So let's not continue to be the county that stops everything and keeps people from wanting to even come here to even ask, because why would they do that when they have to spend thousands and thousands of dollars just to get something you would think should be simple put through? Thank you.
Can I respond to that? Can I respond to that real quick? Can I respond?
Yeah.
Vicki, the county is not the one asking for the delay on this. The AB Asphalt and Ford Construction has not provided the information that they needed to environmental health. So we're waiting for their information so that it can properly be processed. It's not a delay that the Environmental Health Department's putting on them.
Okay, well, let's see, because that's not how I saw it.
Environmental Health Department and planning met with the applicant, reviewed the information necessary to comply with the directive of the commission for information about how they meet the other standards that are in place. The information was all agreed upon by both the applicant and the county, and the continuance was agreed upon, and the date was agreed upon by the applicant as well.
Yeah, it would be more accurate to say that discussions between the EHO and the applicant produced the need for more information from the applicant.
Correct.
So that the analysis could be more thorough, if you will, and so it was mutual.
It was a mutual agreement, yes.
Okay, thank you.
And they understood that the need for that information was necessary. It wasn't, it wasn't something that was arbitrarily imposed upon the applicant by environmental management. This was information that everyone agreed, yeah, we need to have this in order to be able to do that analysis, to make the determination.
But to address Ms. Reinke's issue with respect to the application in general, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the answer is because we have this ordinance 1742-035 applies to M1 and M2 zones, M1 and M2 activities, and that it has been applied, it has been interpreted to apply to all applications within M1 and M2, as opposed to having a list of exemptions, predetermined exemptions, and so I think that's what has spurred virtually all of the time consumption on this. Whereas in the future, and I think we had a discussion about this months ago, that we need to look at that ordinance and we need to look at the zoning and we need to determine whether or not we pigeonhole 035 to certain types of applications and not the universe of applications. Is that a fair way to put it? But we haven't done that yet.
We haven't done that. Yeah, there was discussion about the desire to amend the code in some way, either to eliminate 035 or to modify the way it's applied. We haven't...
Eliminate, modify, confine, or something.
Something.
But that not having been done, here we are.
Right.
And the absence of a ministerial process for this particular kind of application, which counties have, but not ours.
Some do, yes.
Any further public comment on this? If not, we'll close the public hearing and continue the item to October the 8th. Is that correct?
I think you need a vote. There was a motion and a second.
We have that.
We have that.
Yeah, there was one, yes. So, time to
Been
call.
moved and seconded and passed.
No, we need
No,
to vote now.
You haven't voted yet.
We've been there.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Now it's continued to October 8th. Now moving right along. Item 2 is 2014-065 zoning amendment and APC for Sanguinity Cattle Ranch LLC. Gina, you're on.
Good morning. So what you have before you is an application for a zoning amendment and an ag preserve contract. Laura Lynn Sanguinetti Day, on behalf of Sanguinetti Cattle Ranch Incorporated, or LLC, applied originally for a lot line adjustment to adjust the boundary, if you will, of an existing agriculture preserve down in the Copperopolis area. As a result of the lot line adjustment, they were actually going to increase the ag preserve by approximately 27 acres. And they were taking on land that was not previously zoned ag preserve because it was not restricted by the Williamson Act. The reason for the lot line adjustment was originally there were 3 separate assessor parcel numbers, all on 3 different pages, that actually constituted one legal parcel. For some reason, back when the ag preserve was established, there was not really an acknowledgement of the fact that Lot 40 consists of a lot more land than what they actually put in the preserve. So if you will, they actually only put a portion of one single legal lot in the ag preserve. Now that they've come to realize that there's additional land that's in that legal parcel, they wanted to make the ag preserve, if you will, more conducive to their family needs for future family planning, and therefore they have the lot line adjustment. So basically it's an existing ag preserve contract. They're taking on an additional 27 acres into the Williamson Act, and portion of that land that they're taking into the Williamson Act, or proposing to anyway, needs to be zoned appropriately, which is the ag preserve zoning, which goes along with the Williamson Act contract. So that's what you have before you today, is the zoning amendment for those portions of the proposed ag preserve to be joined with the current ag preserve contract.
Okay. Is there anyone here representing the Sanguinetti properties, or? No?
I
No one
don't think
representing?
so.
Yes, sir.
I didn't know it was an agenda item. I'm Greg Meyer from Copperopolis, but I'm familiar with this. I was helping them with this issue. There was some confusion initially. When you went to the county maps, they had the APN number for these individual. Of course, you can have APN numbers for more than one for one legal parcel. But there was some confusion there about the fact that it wasn't that APN was not representing a exclusive legal parcel by itself. So it was a huge, you know, how some of the old ranches have some issues with, that aren't kept up. The map actually showed the boundary line in the wrong location as well. It was a little bit off. And during the estate process in dividing the properties up, the attorney advised them that that was going to, that what they were doing was proper with the application for the Williamson Act zoning. But when they found out later after surveying that it wasn't correct, they found that they had to make adjustments to make it proper. So that's, I wasn't prepared to speak, but that's the insight I have. So.
Would you be sure and sign in? Is there a sign-up sheet there for you?
Sign in?
Yeah. And for the record, would you give your name?
My name again is Greg Meyer.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Is there anyone from the Sanguinetti family? If not, I'll open it up to public comment. Is there anybody in the public here who would like to comment on this issue? There being none, I'll close the public hearing and bring it back to staff for the recommendations, or actually for discussion among us. So. Are there any discussion from the?
I don't have any issue with this.
I've got an issue here. First, this is being requested for purposes of estate planning.
Yes.
Can they be more specific? I mean, what's the problem with estate planning with?
Well, there isn't any problem. It is, Lynn is not the sole owner of the property. The LLC, from what I understand from Lynn, belongs to, incorporates her as well as her children. And they're just trying to establish more usable parcels for those children in the future.
How does this action make?
That was the
for more
purpose of the
usable-
lot, it was the purpose of the lot line adjustment. They're basically trying to clean things up and revise those boundary lines, move them around, if you will.
Okay.
So they've got 3 existing legal parcels, and they're going to end up with 3 legal parcels. They're not creating any additional parcels. They're simply taking the legal parcels that they own, and they're reconfiguring the boundary lines. And reconfiguring those boundary lines is going to change the boundary of the ag preserve.
Okay. On page 5 of 6 at the bottom, under establishing new ag preserve number 346. This is the new number that's going to be given to this preserve. So the property currently has a split land use designation in the county general plan.
Yes.
Can you explain that, please?
Well, currently, the general plan has a portion of the property designated future single-family residential and another portion of the property designated residential center.
Okay. So 2 of the parcels are now designated residential.
No, residential center. It's not just by parcel. The general plan, I don't have the general plan map in front of me. If I recall what it looked like, it split it almost down the middle. The land use designation, future single family, as well as residential center.
Residential center refers to what kind of use?
That's the general plan designation. You can have multitude of zonings compatible with the residential center land use designation. What we have to keep in mind.
Residential center is a broader category.
Right. It's,
go ahead.
yeah. So the general plan is calling it residential center. Residential uses are primarily compatible, obviously, with that designation. A multitude of zoning would be allowed in the residential center. In addition to the future single family, they're pretty identical. I think in the residential center you might have the potential for some smaller parcel sizes, provided that you've got the infrastructure such as water and sewer and roads. But the future single-family residential land use designation generally allows for rural residential agriculture zonings. But we have to keep in mind that the ag preserve, in addition to the A1 zone, which is general ag, are resource designations or zonings, and resource zones are permitted or found compatible in every land use designation in the county. It doesn't have to be natural resource land.
Okay, so this particular action would convert, am I right, would convert the portions of the property from residential or single family and residential center to
No, we're not touching the land use designation because the zoning of ag preserve is found consistent and compatible in any land use designation. So there's no need to actually amend the general plan. As a matter of fact, obviously we're going through the general plan update. The update will do that for us and make it more consistent, if you will, with actually the use of the property. So right now, if you look at draft 3, that will go to I believe a resource production designation rather than this kind of crazy idea of residential center and future single family residential. But again, the general plan designation doesn't have any bearing on the zoning itself in the Williamson Act contract because they are actually restricting the use of the land by entering into contract.
Okay, and this new contract then will restart the Williamson Act with respect to this entire parcel?
Yes, everything that's shown in the purple. I had a little bit of a challenge because we don't have, I don't have the lot line adjustment actually recorded, so I don't have a new parcel layer, but there is a small section of 10 acres down towards the south of that purple on the first, on your first staff report page. There's a small, like 10-acre portion of land that's being adjusted from those 2 smaller parcels, 64, 29, 49, and 50. If you'll notice on the lot line adjustment map, you can see that's about 10.27 acres or so that's being adjusted from those 2 parcels up into the area that will be restricted by contract.
So that'll be purple.
It should be purple, but I had no way to make it purple unless I took my crayons out.
I think it's important to note that if you compare the map on page 1 with that on page 3, the only change in the zoning is that little triangular piece of property. That was the part that the owners were, because of the way the assessor's maps were created, didn't realize that that hadn't been included in the original ag preserve.
Right.
So everything stays the same except for this little triangle here at on the western edge that's being added to the preserve.
Right.
That has always been part of the property, it just wasn't included in the original description of the
07
preserve.
and 47?
47.
047.
531847 is the little triangular piece.
Oh, no, I see it, 47.
So that is actually a legal portion of Lot 40. And for some reason, because it primarily had a separate assessor parcel number on a totally different book and page, that it wasn't acknowledged as being a legal portion of Lot 40 originally. So it was excluded from the Williamson Act. So even though they owned it, and it was adjacent to the Williamson Act land, they didn't include it in the Williamson Act because it was shown up as a different assessor parcel number on a different page in a different book, and nobody acknowledged the fact that it was actually a legal portion of the massive land that they had put in to preserve. So they're just trying to clean things up.
Pretend I understood everything you just said.
Oh.
Okay, that was all my questions.
Anybody else on the commission have any comments? If not, we'll close the hearing and bring it back to staff for our recommendation.
Staff recommends that the Planning Commission adopt a resolution recommending the Board of Supervisors disestablish Ag Preserve number 312 and simultaneously establish an Ag Preserve California Land Conservation Contract 346 for Sanguinetti Cattle Ranch LLC and adopt an ordinance to amend the zoning of the subject property from A1 General Agriculture to AP Agriculture Preserve based on the findings included therein.
Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. 4-0, 1 absent. The next item on the agenda is item 3, 215-054, zoning amendment and administrative use permit for Calaveras Cannabis Collective. Calaveras Cannabis Collective? Gina, I'll just let you take care of that.
Okay, a couple pieces of late correspondence sent to us via email this week. So you have them before you. I made you copies. I believe they were actually emailed to you as well, but I just made copies just to be certain. These are letters basically from members of the community objecting to the dispensary. In addition, I gave you a copy of Chapter 17.91 regarding medical cannabis dispensaries. Knowing that we're going to have some code discussion probably with this, I wanted to make sure that you guys had the entire section of code for your reference, in the event that you haven't memorized it by now. Okay, so real quickly, don't have a whole big PowerPoint presentation, so we'll just kind of go through this real quickly. An application came in to us from Calaveras Cannabis Collective. The request is to amend the zoning of a subject property down on the corner of O'Burns Ferry Road and Copper Cove Drive. Location is 38 Copper Cove Drive in Copperopolis. The subject property is currently zoned C2, which is general commercial. And the purpose of the zoning was to for you to consider an administrative use permit to permit a medical cannabis dispensary. So again, the zoning map actually illustrates all the surrounding zoning. To the rear of the parcel, we've got recreation as well as single-family residential. Across O'Burns Ferry Road to the east, we've got some rural commercial zonings as well as a general commercial zoning. And then the remaining zoning directly adjacent to and surrounding the parcel is also general commercial C2. We do have some multifamily residential zoning that spans out a little bit further off of Feather Court. So as we've kind of discussed before, just briefly, this is a little bit different than what you've seen before. The other applications that we've reviewed have been requests for split zoning, if you recall. This is actually a request for a spot zone location. So if you look at the surrounding zoning in that immediate area, everything to the adjacent to that subject parcel is all compatibly zoned general commercial. And so changing this parcel from a general commercial or C2 zoning to a CP zoning would be considered a spot zone, as we've all identified and discussed in the previous commission hearings. We can touch on that a little bit further if you need to, but again, that would be a spot zoning or down zoning, if you will, from the intensely C2 commercial zoning down to a very restricted CP zone. So again, if the zoning were in place or if the zoning amendment were approved, then the applicant still has to go through the administrative use permit process, which of course is part of this application. And the administrative use permit application process obviously has to be compatible and consistent with the code as written. Code that you have before you, 17.91, which I'm sure you're familiar with, but it lists all of the restrictions that we have to comply with, which include operating restrictions, which we would take a look at once a permit was actually approved. In addition to minimum requirements for issuing medical cannabis dispensaries. And where this application kind of is in trouble, if you will, from our eyes, is the fact that they're not able to meet the minimum distance requirement that code sets forth, and that is a distance requirement from a sensitive use. So if you'll see in this, sorry it's not an aerial photo, but I think it shows up better this way. The big purple parcel that's highlighted down there towards the bottom, 614018 off of Spangler Lane and Oberns Ferry, is a 5-point-something acre parcel that actually has a multiple uses on that parcel. There's an IGA market in addition to, I believe, a hardware store, I think. But one of the uses that is considered sensitive, according to code, is the county library. The Copperopolis Branch Library is located in that building. And the code specifically says that that the dispensary has to be 1,000 feet from a sensitive use. And when we measure the property line to property line, as the code requires, we're coming up short, and so therefore we have recommended denial of the application. Now, the owner actually thinks that there are some special circumstances surrounding this particular situation, in that they feel that you should consider and exempt them from this particular regulation of distance. And I'm sure he's going to talk to you about that a little bit further. One of which is the fact that you cannot visibly see the dispensary or the library from the dispensary and vice versa. But the code doesn't distinguish between, it doesn't actually indicate that a sensitive use has to be visible. As a matter of fact, we don't even take into consideration structures and other obstacles when measuring the distance requirement. In addition, the fact that the dispensary or the library doesn't maintain what we would consider maybe normal business hours, like maybe another, maybe a school perhaps, which would be operating from, say, 8:30 to 3:30 in the afternoon. The library seems to be kind of open, an hour here, hour there kind of a thing. And so in other words, they're not open on a regular basis, but they are open during the week. Again, the code doesn't make any indication that there's an exemption for maybe sensitive uses that don't maintain normal hours perhaps. So based on that, our recommendation is still for denial, but I'm sure that the applicant will want to talk to you. Included in this packet was information that the applicant provided to us with his application. He took the liberty of taking multiple pictures, and I'm sure he's going to want to, like I said, talk to you about that a little bit further. But all that code section that we're referring to, I've got on PowerPoint if we need to go in and clarify things. But basically, we think that the code is very clear, and there is no distinction that there's an exemption for any of these regulations. So our recommendation is to deny the application.
Okay, thank you. Is the applicant or the applicant's agent here who'd like to say something?
Yes.
Be sure and give your name and sign in if you would, please.
Will do. Hello. My name is Gerald Garcia, and I'm speaking to you on behalf of Calaveras Cannabis Collective. Before I get started, I would request that the Vice Chair help maintain the focus pertaining to the zoning change and not our personal opinions or feelings or experiences with cannabis in general. We're here today for a zoning change, and I would respectfully request that the conversation stay to that. I personally have lived in Copperopolis for the past 20 years, and in recent was employed as manager for 4 years with Calaveras County's first legal complying cannabis collective. I'm here today to speak to you about appealing the planning department's decision to rezone 38 Copper Cove Drive. 38 Copper Cove Drive is a freestanding building, a spot zone change, in a strip mall that's been, for the most part, vacant for many years. Our town's somewhat economically depressed, and a lot of vacant buildings exist. We're hoping to occupy 38 Copper Cove Drive, employ many employees, and help increase the employability, or help increase job employment in Copperopolis a little bit. While we understand that the distance from parcel line to parcel line is too close, I question the actual intent of the 1,000 feet distance. The state of California only rules 6, and I understand that our county has put in ordinance for 1,000 feet. If you measure from our building to the actual library itself, the distance exceeds 1,100 feet, so 100 feet over what your requirement is. I'm asking you to consider that condition, because the Copperopolis Library maintains a very small portion, indoor-only portion, of the IGA supermarket property, which is on 5.7 acres. Because of that, we would ask you to consider allowing work to consider that the distance of 1,100 feet from structure to structure. While I do understand the need for the buffer, the current GIS lines are actually off, and we're actually a little over the 700 foot from property line to property line. I did include information to show that, as Gene had mentioned. So in speaking with the distance, it's that the IGA supermarket, again, occupies 5.7 acres, but the library itself only operates in a very small unit and meets the measured requirements if we were to consider it from building to building. If I may I hand out a piece of paper to you all explaining the hours and my explanation to why I feel that the consideration by the board is important because of the operating hours of the library itself. May I hand out?
Sure.
Excuse me.
Well, I understand the need for a buffer zone around the sensitive areas, I'd like you to consider that the Copperopolis Library currently is only open Monday through Thursday and only on part-time hours. Monday, they're only open from 11 to 5, Tuesday from 12 to 3, Wednesday from 10 to 7, Thursday from 11 to 5, for a total of 24 hours during the entire work week. The business we're hoping to open at 38 Copper Cove Drive would be open 5 to 7 days a week and would employ people on a regular basis. If you consider the hours that they're opening and it being a sensitive zone, looking at students that are going to high school, up at Bret Harte High School, released at 3 o'clock, the library is only available to those individuals for a very short period of time. Monday, if they're let out at 3 and the library closes at 5, the library is only accessible to them for a matter of 2 hours in that evening. Wednesday, where they're open better than 8 hours for the course of the day, the only day that they are open full-time or greater, the library would only be accessible to high school students for a matter of 4 hours. And on Thursday, from 3 to 5, they would have access to the library for a minimum of 2 hours. So for our high school students, the library, the sensitive zone that we're discussing, is only eligible for them to use for a matter of 8 hours during the course of a week. Junior high school students attending from Copper attending Mark Twain St. Joseph are usually let out at approximately 2 o'clock. For those students, the library is only accessible 12 hours during the course of the week. On Monday, they have 3 hours after they're let out of school to be able to utilize this location. Tuesday, after they're let out, they have 1 hour to utilize the library itself. Wednesday, from 2 to 7, after they're let out, they have 5 hours total, the most use overall. And on Thursday, if they're let out at 2 and the library closes at 5, they have 3 hours. Again, only totaling 12 hours total for the course of the week. Again, we would be open 5 to 7 days a week with your permission. In that time, I did not count for the time it takes for the students to get from Angels Camp back to Copper to be able to utilize this library. So if you factor in the travel time, it's even less time that our students have to access this library. So for the most part, the library is of minimal use to the sensitive, for the sensitive condition. Another thing I'd like you to consider about our library, unfortunately our library, a much needed library, has struggled to find a permanent location and has moved several times over the 20 years that I have lived in Copperopolis. Even at their current location, they've only been there a short period of time. Please correct me if I'm wrong, but under the current guidelines, school bus stops, which would be considered, or should be considered another sensitive zone, are exempt because they are transient in nature. Our library has moved several times, multiple times over the past few years, and there's no guarantee that it may be there in the next few months. While I do support and understand the need for it, and hoping that we can maintain a library in Copper, I would question the denial based off of their minimal operating hours for these sensitive ages. In closing, with the legalization of cannabis, recreational cannabis, fast approaching California, I feel it is important not to forget the true purpose of this in the first place, the medical cannabis patients. By spreading cannabis collectives out across the county, we would better serve these medical patients who have limited ride access and limited funds to be able to utilize these locations. We are not servicing these medical patients in any way by clumping them all up in San Andreas, our county seat, and not serving the medical patients on the outlying areas of our county, nor are we bringing in neighboring counties' revenue for the businesses surrounding these collectives, restaurants, hardware stores, gas stations, and such. So I would respectfully ask that you consider the zoning. I understand it. You would look at the operating hours of the library, the potential for them having to move in the future, again, and allow us to operate for a year and prove to you that we can be a benefit to our county. Thank you.
Thank you.
I've got some questions, Mr. Garcia.
Yes.
Is there a swimming pool located behind 38 Copper Cove Drive?
There is a private one, yes. Whether or not it's being utilized, I don't know.
Is it operated by the Copper Cove 8A Homeowners Association?
That I do not know.
Do you know whether children use that pool?
From what I understand, the pool was for the homeowners themselves, everybody, not just children.
But their children could use it?
That would be an answer, a question for the homeowners association.
Is that within 1,000 feet of where you want to open this dispensary?
Correct.
Okay. You mentioned bus stops. Is there a school bus stop in the parking lot in front of the building where you want to open the dispensary?
In front of the building, not that I'm aware of.
Where's the closest place where the school bus drops off children?
I don't know. I think there is one in that general location, but from what I understand, they are exempt from the code.
And where do you get that understanding that they're exempt from the code?
They were left out of the code because they're transient in nature. They change quite often.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Yes.
On your application, on page 3, item number 17, you indicate that estimated vehicle use per day at 20. How do you arrive at those numbers?
Well, it's hard to say, but being a smaller area, being that the population is not that great, we don't anticipate the volume of business that you see from the collectives here in the county seat because of the surrounding territory. It would be based off of the territory out there, the population, and my experience in managing the collective here in Calaveras for the past 4 years.
So you're just estimating less traffic because it's a smaller area?
Correct.
You don't look at the number of cannabis patients in an area and determine that that's
Well, there's
you're
no
going
way
to be their supplier? And
I don't have a means of actually calculating the cannabis users in that area, but we're rather distant from everybody else in that location. It's quite a drive, so our focus would be to service the medical cannabis patients in that reasonable service area, as opposed to them having to drive 40 plus minutes out to San Andreas or Valley Springs or Arnold.
okay. I was just curious about that, how you calculated that.
For the most part, a guesstimate. It's hard to say exactly until we know once it would be open.
All right, thank you.
Why did you say that bus stops are exempt from this?
I was in speaking with individuals and from following all the different changes, I was told that they were left out because of the fact that they were transient in nature, so that they were not, because they could change at any time. Children move up in grade, the bus stop may move because of a different school, a different location, that they could not consider those locations as.
Because as I read the ordinance, I mean, for me, when I'm reading it and it says that where youth would congregate, a bus stop would be a place where youth would congregate, so I don't, I mean, I understand it can be transient and move, but
yes.
for the most part, in the town I've lived, the bus stops haven't changed in 30 years, so.
In Copper, they've changed quite a bit. Our kids are only schooled there in elementary, and they actually, bus stops change based off of going up to Mark Twain Elementary for junior high and high school. And then again, they change from the junior high school location over to the high school location. Just in my neighborhood, they've changed several times in the 20 years I've been here, and they've moved around. So once they go from Mark Twain to Bret Hart, then they are, at that point, moved to a different location. Or if a child moves because they stopped in specific areas for kids that live in odd areas, they'll do a point pickup. If that child moves, that bus stop is no longer utilized.
And you don't know where the bus stop is currently?
I don't know where they are exactly.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments from the commission? Okay. How about the public?
Chance to put that first. The 38 copy. Got some paperwork coming to you. I'm Bill McManus of the Calaveras Project.
sure you all have your copies. First of all, I'd like to thank Peter and his staff at the Planning Department for another thorough and complete recommendation and review. It's fair, and they're doing their job to protect the ordinances. I want to go over a few things based on what was said. On the application, item 21 refers or references odor and that there would be no concerns. If there's any marijuana on site or being processed, there is a high probability that there will be an odor. So I just don't know if there's going to be any on site there. Under existing land use information, starting on page 4 of the application, continuing on page 5, item 7F, school district information is requested. The applicant only lists Mark Twain Union School District and has omitted Bret Harte Union School District. This is important information in regards to the school bus schedule at the site of the proposed dispensary. Applicant's letter misstates and miscalculates the public library hours of operation and actual duration of access on each day of operation. As of yesterday, I checked with the library. On Monday, they are open from 10 to 4, Tuesday 10 to 4, Wednesday 10 to 1, and Thursday 10 to 6. And this allows access to students and young people, not just after school, but on school holidays or when school is out or any other thing. Kids can use that location. The applicant's letter makes several references to school hours and bus stops. Given the distance from the schools and the ending times of the school day are irrelevant. Times that students depart and arrive at the school bus stop are the relevant times and are listed in item 6 below, and we'll get to that. Applicant's letter describes school bus stop as transient, when in fact they are carefully chosen. I've spoken with the superintendents of both Mark Twain School District and Bret Harte Union School District, and they have told me that based on their needs, as the population changes, which isn't that often in Calaveras County, they do not choose the bus stops. What they do is they tell the Highway Patrol that they need a bus stop in a certain area. The Highway Patrol will go out and review the area and make recommendations as to safety, access of the buses, so forth and so on. Then the school districts comply with the recommendation made by the Highway Patrol and establish their bus stops at that location. This particular site is one of the busiest bus stops in Calaveras County. It actually accommodates 3 school units. Those are Mark Twain Grammar School, Mark Twain Middle School, and Bret Harte High School. Now, per Bill Davis, Operations Manager for the Mark Twain School District, Mark Twain Grammar School uses the area by the pool on Feather Drive, which is behind the proposed shop. And there's the pool right there. I got a shaky hand, but this is Feather Drive, Copper Cove Drive, and that's the pool, and there's a row of mailboxes there. The grammar school uses that site for picking up students and discharging them at the end of the day. And their bus arrives at approximately 2:40 p.m. Mark Twain Middle School uses the corner of Copper Drive and Feather right down here to pick up and discharge students during the day. And students leave at 7:20 a.m. and arrive back at this location at 3:20. Now, per Patty Reed, Operations Manager for the Bret Harte Union School District, the Bret Harte school bus actually drives into the parking lot. And they pick up and discharge students just steps away from where the proposed dispensary is proposed. So it's a very close fit right in there. And the reason they do that is you have 2 buses from different schools arriving at approximately the same time. The 2 buses should not line up on Copper Cove Drive when they're picking up or discharging students, so Bret Harte actually uses the parking lot. In the mornings, during inclement weather, there's no school hut here or bus hut, so the students tend to congregate in these buildings up here to stay out of the rain. Otherwise, they're standing in the rain waiting for their bus, and they're smarter than that. In addition, Bret Harte Union High School has a late bus or an activity bus, and this is to transport students from the high school back to Copper
And it's the cheerleaders, sometimes athletes, it's after practice. If you have a club meeting after school and you miss the regular school bus at the high school, Bret Harte will provide that transportation back to this area. And the school bus arrives in the parking lot at 6:10 p.m., which during the majority of the year that's after sunset. Each day, approximately 75 students transit this very busy bus stop. Is it good planning or safe procedures to have so many minors in such close proximity to a marijuana dispensary? From all of the feedback that I'm getting, I know that there are hundreds of anxious parents waiting for your answer to this question. And the question is, do we finally start identifying bus stops as sensitive use areas that fit within the code, fit within the definition? This is where minors congregate, and believe me, they don't do it of their own free will. They have to go to school, and they have to take that bus. And when they're dropped off, they can't pull the cord and get off anywhere between Angels Camp and Copperopolis. They have to be taken to that bus stop. So I hope that this commission will finally recognize that school bus stops are sensitive use. And they're sensitive use because these are the most vulnerable of our citizens, and they need to be protected. That's what this is all about. Thank you very much.
Again, my name is Greg Meyer. I've been a Copperopolis resident since 1985, and I own a commercial building at 26 Copper Cove Drive next to this location. I'll speak today to three main concerns regarding the possible zoning change from C2 to CP and the administrative use permit. First, this property is not zoned for a marijuana dispensary and does not meet the minimum mandatory location standards set forth in the county code for medical cannabis dispensaries, as already has been pointed out. Therefore, should not be approved. It's not fair or an acceptable situation for other property owners or business owners that have built or invested in businesses per uses allowed with current zoning. And secondly, touching on some of the same points, the owners are proceeding in this process even though the planning department has recommended denial of the application mainly because of the conflicts and exposure children would have during many daily activities. The school bus stops in front of this location for regular school transportation and for after-school activities. And the county public transportation system has a bus stop here as well. The public library is very near. All are within 1,000 feet and locations where children congregate. The building is in the Copper Cove 8A subdivision and is adjacent to a parcel which was pointed out north of this, and the parcel which is zoned recreational, owned by the Copper Cove 8A subdivision, has tennis courts as well as the swimming pool for kids with room for expansion, was intended for a park area, and is approximately maybe 10 to 15 feet from this location. The parking lot is owned by and is part of the 8A subdivision also. Neighborhoods which have the highest percentage of children in the Copperopolis area are Copper Cove 8A, Bridle Point, Copper Meadow neighborhoods, which again, if you look at this, we talked about 8A being north and west. Bridle Point is west and Copper Meadows is just south. All these are, again, within that same type of a distance. And it's where the children do congregate in the area. Children that live in the 8A subdivision will most commonly walk between this building and the building next door. There's an alleyway right on this property for this building, as they're going to the library or the shopping center, the grocery store and that sort of thing in the shopping center. Copper Cove 8A subdivision has approximately 180 homes, and as I was reading the, the application, the applicant listed 6 manufactured homes in back of the location. This is ground zero for exposure for children. This is where children congregate and where their activities are in Copperopolis. Thirdly, on a personal level, we personally would have never purchased and built this building with zoning allowing this use or uses allowed. Our investment is at stake. The tenants in our building, M&M and Associates, Century 21 Real Estate Sales, have put us on notice. They have had this exact experience already at another location.
Say that again, please. Century 21 has done what?
It's the company is M&M and Associates, is Century 21 Sales company. It's a real estate sales company.
Yeah.
Is that
They've had what experience?
They had exactly the same experience that we're proposing here. They had a dispensary going in adjacent to them next door. They lost clients, and after 2 armed robberies.
At some other location?
At another location. Lost, these are the tenants in my building.
Right.
And this is, I'm explaining what they do when they are confronted with this situation.
Yeah, where was this other experience?
In other words, this is my personal interest because I'm a landlord.
What was this other, where was their other experience? In some other location?
That's in Ring Valley, which is adjacent to Fairfield.
Okay, I know where that is. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. So after 2 armed robberies, they closed that location. Okay. Following up on just a slightly different point, and it's not exactly why we're here today, but I do have a doctor of pharmacy degree myself, and I understand the medical marijuana discussion. There are very few, if any, legitimate medical uses that marijuana cannot, for marijuana that cannot be more adequately addressed with FDA-approved drugs dispensed at a licensed pharmacy under and with credible physician supervision. As a point of interest, as most of you know and everyone knows, the active recognized ingredient in marijuana has been available in the form of a prescription drug called Marinol, which has been in pharmacies for years with little or no use. I understand that there are discussions regarding CBD versus THC percentages, and that there are some people that actually believe they are finding relief from for a true medical symptom. But this real number is a very small percentage of the population, and in a community the size of Copperopolis, it is an insignificant need. Excuse me, I've got a cold. Tuolumne and Stanislaus counties do not allow dispensaries, and for this reason it is predicted that customers will primarily be coming from outside of our Copperopolis community. And the intent of Proposition 215, the Calaveras Compassionate Use Act, and the SB 420 was not to create a cover for selling marijuana for large profits in a situation that is confused and not well regulated. Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm Ken Gutman, 20-year resident of Copperopolis and retired deputy sheriff from Santa Cruz County, where my specialty was working with the high school students and the students as a representative of our department on campus and talking to kids about their lives and their impressions of their environment and their surroundings. In the 60s, when I started in law enforcement, and into the 70s, obviously things changed. It was a felony when I first started, and then law enforcement officers tend to change their views a little bit on strict enforcement of law due to social pressures as well as practical pressures. The one variable that never changed for us was allowing children to be in the vicinity of drug use or drug sales. People who we knew to be involved in that world were never allowed to be near where children were, near schools, the pool, the area around that. We move them out in a hurry or enforce the law very strictly if they didn't make reasonable judgments on what they were going to do. Of course, reasonable judgments is how law enforcement does a lot of things. What's reasonable and prudent. What I observe, I'm 3 years Lions Club president, I'm always down in that area doing something with the community, and we have a food pantry. You're hearing about the school, which is, I see kids there all the time, hanging out at the bus stops, hanging in the parking lot. That just seems to be where they congregate, and after school they sit and talk. They'll be very aware of what's happening in this because young people are far more observant than the everyday resident. They'll know exactly what's happening here. They do digress and egress that area from next to it, and I have observed that. There's two other gathering things that are not permanent, but they're there and they're quite prevalent. We have a copper closet that's put on where young people and people from the whole area come and get clothing. It happens, I believe it's at least once a month. And then they also have the food pantry, which is right next door and adjacent to this area, where all the families come to get their food distribution for the people who are in need or have a use for things. So there's children playing in that parking lot incessantly. Yes, sir. You have a question?
That event, is that something that the Resource Connection puts on?
I believe it is, yes. I know I go there and I help them, and I've worked there and participated, so I know what the practical things are that happen there. It's part of what our community, it is a ill-used shopping center, and the library used to be right in that shopping center.
Yeah. Can
Yes.
I ask you one more question?
Yes, certainly.
Is it sort of like a Saturday market type of
Yeah, but
affair?
this one's on a Thursday. If I remember the Copper Closet, I would stand to be corrected on this, is on a Thursday during the day, and a lot of little children are there. And on a Saturday, Shirley's also set up on weekends, depending upon need. There's sometimes increased need, so she puts more stuff out for people who can't afford to buy clothing. And then the food thing is, I believe, once a month during the week, during working hours, where families and a lot of mothers and fathers bring their small children. And there's quite a playground. The parking lot is not heavily used because, as was pointed out, it's does not have a lot of strong usage for economic reasons in Copperopolis, which you all know doesn't thrive economically as far as a place to do business, but it is a place where the family meets. There's several other spot things where they have flea markets there, and they have car shows there. I've seen car shows and so I mean it is part of the community. This little teeny parking lot that's sort of in dispute has become an integral meeting place for our entire community. And from my perspective as an ex-deputy, I would worry because of the people who would frequent that for medical reasons. I would not so much worry, but people who may have other reasons for frequenting this area, I would worry. And if it were my beat or my district of control, I would say, you can't hang around here when the kids are here. You keep out of here, you know. And there'd be certain people, and I know that's somewhat subjective on my part, but this is what reality is for law enforcement officers, is you find out what's happening in your area and you try to protect the people who need protection. So it worried me when I heard about this, and I thought, boy, doesn't seem to be the reasonable place to put this, because this is the one place we don't have much of a community, and we're all over the hills. So we don't have a community center. That little shopping center, for all of its foibles and shortcomings, is our little community center. It's where the Lions Club has done things. And it's where, you know, we've had events there. We've had car washes. These are infrequent, but this is where the community goes to do things. The high school kids do car washes in that parking lot within 20 feet of this dispensary proposed. And that's where they choose to do it because they don't have many other places. We don't have a lot of places to go. So I was worried about that, and this is why I'm here. And I know that you all have concerns, and I think the county is responding appropriately. Your planning commission is responding appropriately to the situation as it's pointed out to us. So I thank you for the opportunity to talk to you, and it's simply my experience. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay.
My name is Louis Boitano. I live in Copperopolis, and I've lived there since 2001, I guess. I'm a member of the Calaveras County Board of Education, and I'm not speaking on behalf of the board, but as an individual. But coming from that background, I have serious concerns about the location that is being proposed. And I don't want to be redundant, but for all the reasons that you've heard already. It is a location where kids congregate, and I think we're doing a great job educating students in this county, but we have a number of obstacles to overcome, and we don't need any more by having a center located where they congregate. And I will tell you that those bus stops, although they've been characterized as being transient, have been located there for as long as I can remember, and for good reason. And there is no doubt that they do, in fact, congregate. So for those reasons, I would oppose granting the zoning change that is being requested, because I think it's in the best interest of our community, and in particular, the students who would be exposed to it. Thank you.
My name is Tom Liberty. I'm the former director of Collective Patient Resources, which was a community service organization founded in 2009, serving the Tri-County. I also spent 30 years working in the juvenile justice system, so I also care about our children. And previous to that, I was a psych tech in the U.S. Air Force, from which I was honorably discharged. I've lived in Calaveras County for almost 20 years. Before I begin, I'd like to stress that I'm speaking only for myself. I'm not representing CPR or any other organization. I'm here to ask the Commission to consider Mr. Garcia's proposed dispensary for the following reasons. First, I'm somewhat concerned that there may be some hesitation on the part of the county to consider Mr. Garcia's proposal because of the interactions that the county has had with other dispensary operators who have not worked in tandem with county officials. On the surface, this reaction would seem to be a little bit reasonable. It might seem contradictory for the county to insist that existing dispensaries go strictly by the book and then turn around and give Mr. Garcia what could appear to the uneducated as special treatment. However, I would like to make the argument that the situations are nothing alike, and this commission can and should evaluate Mr. Garcia's proposal on its own merits. We presently have 5 dispensaries operating in Calaveras County. Of those, exactly 1 got approval before opening. Mr. Garcia is working with county officials and getting permission before opening his doors. I respect the fact that he's taken this open approach, and I would suggest that this openness warrants some consideration. I am gravely concerned that by rejecting this proposal, the message to the community is that it is better to ask forgiveness than permission, and will encourage others to skip this process and simply open their doors. Second, I would remind the Commission that our county officials have historically been very understanding and supportive of cannabis patients and providers ever since cannabis was legalized 20 years ago. In that spirit, I would ask that the Commission recognize that Copperopolis is a severely underserved community when it comes to safe and legal access. If a patient in Copperopolis is not participating in a legal collective grow The nearest dispensary is in San Andreas. This distance is a hardship for many patients. I would encourage you to take this under consideration. I would also point out that our present county ordinance regarding dispensaries was well-meaning when it was written, but it was written over 10 years ago. While it was cutting edge at the time, it is now severely outdated. The 1,000-foot rule that is in the present code, while not unreasonable on its face, is almost twice the distance of the 600 feet that has been adopted as state law. I believe this could give the commission some latitude. In addition, while it is desirable that children not be given cannabis or direct access to cannabis, there is not a single study that suggests that the proximity of cannabis dispensaries to libraries or schools has any impact whatsoever on cannabis use by minors. In fact, cannabis use by minors peaked 50 years ago in the 70s when cannabis was completely prohibited and users faced stiff criminal penalties. The statistics, as much as we want to listen to the fear and it pulls at our heartstrings, the statistics actually show that teen cannabis use has declined as legal cannabis has become more readily available. Point being, while our public policy should be crafted with the safety and well-being of our children in mind, it should also be crafted on facts, not fear. And the fact is that teen cannabis use has declined as its legal availability has increased. I also must say it's been, physically, it's been very, very hard to sit here and listen to people who I believe are using our children as like human shields to prevent access to a product that's safe and legal. It's really hasn't been good. Finally, I want to address a point that won't show up on any of the paperwork involving this issue, and that is the character of Mr. Garcia. One of my primary functions at CPR was the coordination of our patient-provider program, which ensures that any terminally ill person in the Tri-County has access to cannabis free of charge. I continue to coordinate that service even though I'm no longer the director of CPR. I first encountered Jerry in 2010 when we served our first law enforcement officer who had terminal cancer. The officer did not want to smoke cannabis. He hadn't smoked cannabis in his life. In fact, he'd put a few people in prison for it. We decided that we needed professionally manufactured and properly titrated edibles in order to meet this officer's needs. Jerry supplied what was needed without hesitation and free of charge. Over the next few years, I continued to hear about Jerry, who worked at the Blue Mountain Collective, the first and only approved dispensary that went through the proper channels here in Calaveras. His kindness and his supportiveness at that place were always a topic of conversation. Last year, Collective Patient Resources was in the paper quite a bit, and the additional media exposure resulted in a higher community awareness of the services we provided, especially our medicine program. By 2015, CPR was spending $3,000 per month in order to keep up with our patients who needed free titrated edibles. I sent out an email explaining to people that we weren't going to be able to sustain this expense, and for a very short time we were actually unable to take on any new patients. Then Jerry called us. Because of his volunteer work and his kindness, we were able to reduce our monthly expenses from $3,000 per month to $300 per month. Jerry is presently providing medicine for 2 cancer patients, 1 emphysema patient, 1 multiple sclerosis patient, and 1 patient with diffuse scleroderma. He has never asked for 1 cent. Every single one of those patients except for 1 is terminal. We all know character is important. Mr. Jerry Garcia has integrity. He's presenting himself to you. He's showing respect for the system. He's asking you in good faith to consider a reasonable request for a project that will benefit this county both fiscally and from a humanitarian perspective. Over 10 years ago, this county made the decision to allow cannabis dispensaries to open in Calaveras. Since then, things have not gone exactly as planned, maybe because this process has often been skipped. The commission now has a chance to make a decision about the possibility of placing a dispensary in a location that actually makes sense from a planning perspective and having it run by a person who respects the system and cares about his community. I respectfully ask that this commission recommend for this project, at least pass it on to the board. It's the right thing to do, and it will send a strong message to the community about what good faith cooperation with local government can achieve. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you.
Good morning. My name's Elaine St. John, and I live in Copperopolis. I am a realtor, and I also worked on the corner where Coldwell Banker is, and I can also attest to some of the things that we've heard. There's a swimming pool, there's tennis courts. There's also a workout area, which a fellow realtor that couldn't be here, she has a club where you can go in and lift weights and whatnot, and she said that she's recently had to change the code to get into that building, which is a couple doors down from where they're talking, because the teenagers give it to each other. So there's a lot of teenagers going in and out, and they'll be in the vicinity of the club. The other thing I wanted to also say that one of the reasons I became so alarmed is because Bill McManus was accosted in the parking lot here recently by the Valley Springs Cannabis Club. And I'm happy to see that he's okay. But when something like that happened, that alarmed me that perhaps we could have something like that in Copperopolis. So it is within the, the problems of children being nearby, and I know that you're leaning towards saying no to this, and that's the way I would hope you would go. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment before we go back to the applicant?
Yes.
Okay, yeah.
My name is Mark Block. I'm the owner of 38 Copper Cove as of a couple of months ago. I also am a relatively new owner of 20 acres up in Railroad Flat, where I plan to build a home and spend the rest of my years. I've been living for 25 years in Tuolumne County, the last 10 years up on Big Hill by the Repeater Towers, where I built a 3-bedroom, 2-bath cabin. Typically, after some time in the United States Army, some time truck driving, I became a person who purchases, fixes up, and sells houses and offices. That's what I'm doing here. And also, I haven't heard much here that I disagree with from either side. I don't see this as adversarial. I see this as a community getting together and working through issues that need to be worked through. And I want to approach one issue that's already been brought up is Jerry. My little sister is an anorexic, and I came, she's 50-year-old, my little sister. And about 3 years ago, I came to Jerry, inquiring at Blue Mountain, his previous employer, and the collective in Calaveras, what I could do for her in order to stimulate her appetite. He started giving me the background and the education I needed to help her, and I think I could reasonably credit her being alive today to Jerry's help. I didn't know what to do. I first came in to learn about cannabis in 2008 when my mother had liver cancer, and it was recommended by her doctor to ingest cannabis in order to alleviate her symptoms of anxiety. And for the last 5 months of her life, the smiles and the laughing, as limited as they were, I attribute them to the use of cannabis. It was clear that it was helpful. So when people are really sick, I've witnessed that it helps. I'm no doctor, I'm not in the medical field. I'm just a guy who fixes buildings. The other thing I wanted to mention, I didn't even plan on talking, is the proximity to children. The children issue came up. Is it okay if I walk up to the map?
Certainly.
Is that all right? Okay.
But you'll have to speak up when you do it because you'll be away from the microphone.
I will speak up. If I can stay out of the light. To both sides. This is the area where the pool is. Children go there regularly. Children are part of Calaveras County, and I want everybody here to know that I am someone who protects children in all cases. I've worked for 8 of the last 12 weeks. 72-hour periods on that building. It was in bad shape, unoccupied for years, and I really take it as a challenge to fix it. It's starting to look pretty good. However, in those 72-hour periods, I've seen a lot of children come and go. Every avenue that everyone spoke of here is exactly where the children go. I've witnessed it. They walk between the buildings, and they walk around that parking lot. There are buses that stop there. And as a person who has 2 adult children, should I go back now?
Yeah.
Now, I have one other thing to say about the map.
Okay, because you...
Is that all right?
Yeah, we want you on the microphone.
I don't need to look at the map anymore. Yeah, children are all over Calaveras County. And I would be first on the list to protect, as the owner of a building, any child in any situation. And I can assure you that in my building, as I oversee it, there will be no danger to any child there. And that's the only thing I have to give is my hard work and my word, and I give you my word as an owner. The 2 things I want to just cover again, I mentioned, the person that I have chosen to occupy the building with a cannabis collective is the best choice I could possibly find. And he's a great guy, compassionate and caring just like I am, a man who has 3 children, who raised them in Copperopolis, lives there with his teenage children, and is very conscientious and conscious about the children in the area. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Any other public comment before we go back to the applicant?
Joe Kelly from the unrepresented area of District 1. Could you go back to that screen where you showed about the company advertising? That's the one thing that caught my attention. Yeah, there was 2 paragraphs in their page there. Is that it? No, 1,000 feet. It stated, it basically stated is the company advertises primarily intended for minors. And I'm wondering, pardon me?
The code section.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
This is bothersome is when it's, if this is a code section, but yet it's being used for this gentleman, we don't even know what his advertising is. At least I don't. And what I saw with that started to make me think about, the negatives of it. So the negative of it to me comes about is, how do you determine that that advertising is primarily for children? If it's a code section, then it should kind of be transparent, tell us how it came about, how the determination was made, or it's just arbitrary to throw fear into people. Now, don't get me wrong, I don't have any dog in this race. My concern is just as a citizen. But I don't care either way because I don't use it and I don't have children that do. And parents that let their kids get into it should go to a cannabis school and learn to keep their kids away from it if they need to. Or a school of adulthood, I guess. One other thing I had was in this documentation was apparently the owner of the building signed a document that has the Calaveras County Agriculture disclosure statement in it. This is a mandatory statement, I imagine. I do find it is differs quite noticeably from the California Code Section 3482.5, the Right to Farm Act. I think maybe this thing needs to be drawn out a little, changed a little bit, because I take exception with the last couple of long sentence, and will not consider the inconvenience or discomforts arising from agricultural operations as a nuisance if such operations are consistent with accepted agricultural practices and standards. The Right to Farm Act has a number of paragraphs in it, and it does lay out and tell you what to and what cannot be done. And I don't think this meets the standard, so I think it needs to be changed, or at least need to be brought back for review to the commission or whoever, to the commission and the board to change it, because it's a little old. It needs to be updated. One last thought. Early on in this county, when permits were just starting, They were considered an inconvenience by the supervisors. And look what we have today, regulation of our lives beyond belief. I thank you for your time.
Thank you.
For
Any other
clarification,
public comment before we go back to the applicant? There being none, does the applicant have any comments regarding what's been said, other than the fact you'll want to say you were right and they're wrong?
Actually, no, not at all. I understand their fears. I'm a parent as well. I have 3 daughters. Just because I'm involved in cannabis for my own medical use, my daughters are prohibited from it. In fact, we have tested our own daughters in the past just to make sure that they understand. We sit and educate our daughters about cannabis, about the medical use of cannabis, also about the downside of cannabis. If there's no medical use, what it could do for, or how it could ruin their life for them. I think it's important to understand, with all the fear that we've heard up here about cannabis, this is still about a zoning issue. I understand, and my kids live in this town. We have no means, by no means have any intent on exposing our children in the county, in Copperopolis, to cannabis. We plan to keep our signage out front of the building, if we're permitted, to a minimum, so that customers may identify the building, but nothing identifying cannabis. We would love to work with the school, maybe even with the library, to produce educational material for children. I agree, they should not be introduced to cannabis other than educated about it. Not its benefits, but its need for a need for a medical purpose. I understand the fear, but I think it's important that we start to look at our medical patients as well. They're here. They may not be able to make it here to speak. They may not be able to speak in general about it because they're not to that comfortable of a level. But it's important we don't forget these people. We're here to help. If you consider Blue Mountain Collective, one that you have approved, Calaveras High School has their PE classes every day, run right past the school. They have a meeting point right across the driveway from Blue Mountain Collective, and they meet there, gather at that point, and they walk back. If we look at the collective that has, or the collectives that have been, that did start up properly through the proper channels, you've had no major repercussions, no influence on the kids. I think it's important to look at the example we had that I was part of developing, and we continue to carry that on into this location if you would grant us this. If needed, I understand the issues with the library and would be willing to consider specific hours of closing for that. But I would request that we consider allowing this motion to go onto the board. We're here to help the community, not hurt it. And we'd also like to be involved in educating the kids on medical, the only need for cannabis at this time is medical purposes. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. If there are no further comments, we'll close the public hearing and bring it back to the commission for discussion and a conclusion. Does anybody have anything they'd like to add?
Well, I'd give my views on it. This is a zoning issue. And our job is to apply the ordinance as it's written. If the ordinance should be changed, it's up to the Board of Supervisors to change it, and it's not up to us to bend it or grant exemptions from it. And as I read the ordinance, it doesn't say you measure the 1,000 feet from the property line of the parcel in which the dispensary is located to the building or portion of the building or structure in which a sensitive use occurs. If it did that, then I think the applicant would have a pretty good point that he meets the requirements of the ordinance, but it doesn't say that. It says you measure from the property line of the parcel in which the dispensary is located to the boundary of the property on which the building or structure or portion of the building or structure in which a sensitive use occurs or is located. And that seems to me to indicate that the planning department has correctly interpreted and applied this ordinance. And so that really is sort of the end of it, because it just doesn't meet the requirements. But on top of that this is a spot zoning and a down zoning request, which generally are not appropriate. Probably in the real world, I'm most concerned about the school bus stops because they are places where minors congregate, and it's right there. We have the swimming pool behind and the tennis courts, which are within 1,000 feet, and the children use those. And so I don't think that I could grant this application consistent with the ordinance and all of those facts.
David?
Question for staff. With respect to the bus stop issue, we've heard discussion about, from Mr. Garcia that bus stops are excluded.
The county has not made a determination that bus stops are excluded. But on the flip side, we have not actually gotten verification or confirmation, if you will, from county council that they are included in as a sensitive use. Obviously, we've had a lot of discussion about bus stops. This isn't the first time, but we have not gotten a legal determination from council as to whether or not a bus stop would be considered a sensitive use, but is absolutely not excluded.
I think that the question is still out there, whether or not a bus stop is considered a sensitive use. The issues where it's come up, the decision was made based on zoning, and so we haven't really reached that as a determining factor. If you look at the code, it says an establishment.
Yeah.
And that's, you know, I don't know that you would consider a bus stop an establishment. Whether we need to be clear, whether we need to amend the code to address, to be more specific, this is problematic for us in trying to make a determination. We've had a number of discussions here at the commission, as well as, you know, internally in our department and with applicants on what is a sensitive use. Is a pizza parlor a sensitive use? Is a bus stop a sensitive use? It would be beneficial if we could clarify that. But again, the board has not decided to revisit this ordinance yet. We may. There's been some discussion of that possibility of bringing this back.
But there is no legislative history that points to exclusion of them. It's just, it's never been a determinative factor because there was always something else with respect to these applications that trumped it, so to speak.
That's correct. Yeah. And I don't know if the legislative history, if there was actual discussion during the drafting of the ordinance that should we include bus stops, should we not? I haven't researched it, but there's nothing that I'm aware of at this point that was purposefully excluded, or it was just wasn't considered, and now we're addressing the issue.
I would add to what Commissioner Wooster was mentioning about the zoning issue, which everybody agrees is what it is. And we, earlier you heard a little bit of a discussion about the item that we're going to be facing, have been facing with respect to asphalt plant. And there's an ordinance that we're having to work with that, 1742-035. And whether we like it or not, we have that ordinance, and it's causing some people a great deal of angst. I think everybody in the commission, I mean, it's a problem in the way it's worded, but we're following it. And I think that's the point that Mr. Wooster is making, is that that's our job, is to follow the ordinances as they're written. And if they're written badly and if they need to be updated, then that comes as a separate process. It doesn't come, it doesn't happen in connection with a particular application. But I would agree also with Mr. Wooster that for me the school activity seems to be, would be for me the more sensitive issue than the library in terms of kid hours on site, if you will. I bet if you added those up, it would exceed that of the library use by the children in the hours when they would have access to it. So it's on the to-do list, I think, of looking at this ordinance and cleaning it up and clarifying some of the issues around sensitive use. And that is even assuming that the county chooses to have a cannabis ordinance, or that we choose to follow the lead of, the lead is the wrong word, Tuolumne County and Stanislaus and exclude it completely. Yeah, there's no guarantee that the library will be there in the future, but that's kind of not the point either. It's there now. Spot zoning. The position of the department with respect to spot zoning, split zoning, we had quite a bit of discussion about that on a previous couple of applications. Spot zoning, on the other hand, can you give us direction on the pros and cons of spot zoning? I understand the down zoning aspect of this particular parcel, and I understand the pros and cons around down zoning. Is it really the same thing? If you spot zone in a down zone mode, this is what...
Typically, the concern with spot zoning is that you introduce a use into an area that's incompatible with other uses, and it's typically something that's more intensive. So if you say, well, this is an appropriate location for industrial, even though it's surrounded by residential or commercial, that would be sort of the incompatible nature of spot zoning. So you want to sort of, keep your industrial uses separate from those kinds of incompatible uses. In general, spot zoning is, let's say, frowned upon as just sort of a means to accommodate a specific use, but there are times when a site, can be and should be zoned something that's different than everything around it, typically because of existing uses. For example, we have spot zoned industrial uses where there is a quarry. That's the only industrial use that's out there, and it's zoned industrial, but it's more of an after effect kind of zoning. There is nothing, as we've discussed, illegal about spot zoning. I think the concern here would be more of long-term economic desires for something where you're going to a less intensive use, or restricting the commercial use to just offices, and in this case, a dispensary, that would otherwise be available for other retail type uses. Now, I understand that the fact that the commercial center is certainly underutilized, and that there doesn't seem to be demand today for retail uses of that site. So those are the kind of things that we sort of have to weigh in looking at whether it's appropriate to rezone this particular site, professional office commercial, compared to the C2 or a C1 zone.
Thank you.
Anything else?
Not for me, other than my position is to agree with staff recommendation to oppose the application.
And you?
So based on the conversations, I'm basically with Commissioner Wooster and Commissioner Tuno. The ordinance is pretty clear on the part of this going in, and we've heard these other issues, but I do want to say thank you, Mr. Garcia, for following the process, because we've had to hear other ones that did not. I think it was an exemplary that you would take the time to do the process right, give us an opportunity. It's unfortunate that you're falling within an area that isn't going to comply to the ordinance right now. But I still wanted to take the time to say thank you, because it's much better to sit here and hear nice things about you versus we've opened illegally and it's a fight and it's costing our county thousands and thousands of dollars to get things straightened out after the fact. So thank you.
I just thought I would mention the fact that this issue of split zoning and spot zoning keeps coming up. There's a fact that most people overlook and they forget about, and that is that once you start toying with the zoning, you cause a lot of problems in the future, such as somebody wants a zone change on a particular place that's surrounded by other uses, and they say, well, what he's doing is going to be fine. Well, next week the poor fellow dies, the zoning is still on that piece of property, and there's a lot of other uses that may fit into that new zoning. So you really have to be kind of careful when you start toying with the zoning when it's around other uses. I just thought I would mention the fact that the library hours, I would hope it become kind of a moot point because of the fact that as people get more, a little better educated, the library uses will expand and your uses will shrink. So I'm not sure that the library hours are really that important in the long run. I will be voting in favor of the staff's recommendation. Are there any other comments from the commission before we ask for the recommendations?
Staff recommends that the Planning Commission pass a motion to sign Resolution 2015-020 denying 2015-054 zoning amendment and administrative use permit for Calaveras Cannabis Collective based on the findings included therein.
Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That's 4-0, 1 absent.
Quick announcement. This item being denied will not automatically go before the Board of Supervisors. So this will be the final hearing unless the application, or this decision, I should say, is appealed. It has to be formally appealed to the board in order to go on. There is a procedure to do that. It's written into code. You have 15 business days to do so if you choose to follow the appeal process.
I think that's 15 calendar days,
What did I say?
business days.
Oh, sorry. Thank you, Peter.
Okay. And I assume the study session is not going to be taking place?
So just for those who came in late, the discussion of the general plan technical background report was continued to next week, the 17th, and we do not have any study session for you on the agenda today.
Okay. Now we have another public comment period. If there's anyone here who wants to bring up an item that is not on today's agenda, this is your opportunity.
It was continued to next week.
Pardon me?
That was continued to next week. The commission continued discussion of the technical background report to next week.
Oh, the technical
Yes.
is considered.
Put it off for a week, yes.
Okay. It'll be next week or 2 weeks?
Next week, the 17th.
Next, okay. Is it possible to pass on
I distributed the letter that you sent to me, the letter that you sent to us, was distributed to all the commissioners.
Pardon?
We distributed that to all the commissioners earlier. You can, okay, thanks, yeah. Okay.
Joe Kelly of the unrepresented area of District 1. One of the last meetings I attended here, Mr. Worcester, and in a vote, went with an abstention. My issue is this: I'd like to know what the policy is for the Planning Commission when an abstention vote is taken. Does it do the same as with the supervisors, or does it that it goes to the majority vote. So if everyone voted no, but Mr. Wooster was in favor but did an abstention, or the opposite, everybody was yes and he voted in abstention as a, not necessarily a no vote, but as a contrary vote, it would then go with the majority vote. And I don't know if that pertains to the Planning Commission or not. It does pertain to the board. Mr. Spellman got that one started, and it came back, and we had a big furor in this board chambers a couple of times, I believe. So do you folks know what it goes as?
What do you think, Peter?
My understanding is abstaining. It is neither a yay or a nay. It's as if he didn't vote.
So then the code that the county, the Board of Supervisors had is only specific to them and not to subsequent other appointed boards.
I'm not sure what specific code section, and if the commission would like, I could research that more and bring it back to you as far as what that actually means. You know, if it's a 2-2 vote and one abstention, but it requires a majority to pass a motion, then it means the motion fails. If it's a 4-0-1 vote, the motion passes, and the abstention simply meant that the individual abstaining either couldn't vote because of a conflict or chose not to for whatever reason, but it doesn't change the outcome of the vote.
Well, I think that was the point of why the Board of Supervisors brought it forward, because it was whether the person chose to and for what reason, because the reason wasn't given at the time when Mr. Spellman was using it. So then it became a critical issue that he was using it a lot.
Well, I don't know that someone who is abstaining needs to declare why they abstain. There's nothing I'm aware of, but I will review the county code to see if there's something that I'm unaware of.
Well, I think maybe it might be something you might want to send up to the board to also have addressed, to see if how they want to have it looked at, if they want it to follow their procedures or be separate from.
Well, that might be something
I would agree that we need to research that. If the county has some sort of a special code that they're using, it's important that we be aware of that, because I would think we'd follow the same code.
What was the situation with the board with respect to a 2-2 vote and one abstention, do you recall?
Your board?
No, the supervisors. How was that being treated?
It was being treated as abstention. They didn't know what to do with it. And so then they created this ordinance, or whatever you want to call it, to create it that the abstention goes with the populist vote.
But there is no populist vote in a 2-2.
Well, I don't. You had a vote here, though. There were 3 people sitting here.
No. I'm not talking about that.
Well, I can't address that because I don't know if it was even addressed with the Board of Supervisors. I don't remember that. All I'm doing is bringing is what I saw with Mr. Wooster, and I wasn't sure if I didn't understand what you folks are under procedures of. So if I don't, there's a good possibility you folks don't. And I don't want to see you not more knowledgeable than I am.
So our code says, this is or section 244.110, which is on the section on the Planning Commission. Planning Commission resolutions must be passed by at least 3 members voting aye thereon. Failure to receive 3 aye votes constitutes a denial. So it's essentially a no vote. I mean, it has the effect of not supporting the action, the motion that's before the commission. The motion could be to deny a project, and so it's not supporting the motion that's before the commission. I don't know that there's anything really unique about that. That's fairly standard.
If you're not supporting it, then that's the same as a no vote, is it?
Essentially it is, yes. Yeah. I think that if someone doesn't want to vote no for some reason, other than the fact that they have a conflict and they must abstain, but if they choose, I'm not comfortable with the motion, but I'm not so opposed to it that I'm going to vote no, it has the effect of voting no.
See, I interpreted it as the supervisor or commissioner simply being not present. So it just changes the number of people that are needed for a quorum. on that?
No, that's different. Because someone who abstains is actually present in the discussion. If they're not here, Fawn's not here today.
You're saying it doesn't change the quorum?
She's absent. That's different.
Right, she's
The
absent.
quorum-
We've got 4 people here. If one of us abstains and the vote goes 2-1,
It requires 3 positive votes to pass a motion, regardless of the number of people that are here. If only 3 people are here, it requires a unanimous vote. We had that discussion several months ago, but I think there were only 3 members present, and there was a question in my prior jurisdiction. We provided the applicant the opportunity to continue the item until there was a full commission available. That's not part of our rules or regulations, but and there was a discussion about whether or not we should allow them to continue. I think we end up doing that anyway, just out of courtesy to the applicant. But it would require, to pass a motion requires 3 votes, and abstention is effectively not voting in favor of the motion.
and a quorum is 3 people.
3 people, a
So-
majority of the commission. So you can conduct business with 3 people.
But then you have to have a unanimous decision.
It have to be a unanimous decision, yes.
Okay.
One other thing is, Mr. Spellman took, when he got spanked and he started doing what you suggested, Mr. Tuno, he would leave before the issue came up and go out and wait until he heard that the issue was over, and then he would come back in.
Yeah, I saw that.
So I would like to see that if one regulatory agency has a code or a way they do things, that they all have, and that everything is equal in this county, or transparent, so we know, and we don't know, or I wouldn't be up here asking. But thank you, and thank you, Mr. Wooster and Mr. Tuno, and all of you. Oh, maybe county council talk now. Or when.
Okay, there are agencies, and I don't know if...
Would you give your name, please?
Oh, Vicki Mills, I'm sorry. There are agencies in this county that does what Mr. Kelly was talking about. If you have, say, like this one with 4 people, and 3 of you vote yes on something, and 1 abstains, in their operating manuals, or SOPs, or whatever you want to call them, that abstention goes with the majority. I don't know if the supervisors are one of those that has that? Okay. That is something you need to check out if it governs all of you. Because it is worded in their manuals as such that the abstention goes with the majority. Something else that county council may want to look at if the supervisors are doing that is it's highly possible that that is against the Brown Act.
Vicki, are you talking about commissions that are subject to supervision, oversight by the Board of Supervisors?
No, I'm talking about a totally separate agency in this county that has that. And evidently the Board of Supervisors has the same thing. It's a special district.
Well, I would say that that does not apply to the commission. It's not a part of our bylaws, our operating procedures. It's not a part of the code that applies to the planning commission. Now, the board may have adopted their own procedure for that, but it's very clear. It requires 3 aye votes, not 2 aye votes and an abstention. But there wouldn't be a majority. If there was a majority, what it would do, the only thing I can see that would do would be if, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
If your code does not address the abstention, it will leave you a gray area since the supervisors, which are the ones that appoint the commissioners, if they are doing that, it leaves a gray area whether you fall under their procedures or not.
I don't think it's gray.
That does not address
The Planning Commission
abstentions.
may adopt rules of procedure to supplement the rules set forth in this chapter. It says nothing about that we will abide by the board's rules and procedures. We adopt our own, we have our own. And just for the record, Julie said, I'm right.
And that adds to confusion over
obviously there's some confusion that there.
So who do you think's doing a better job?
You guys.
I said, who do you think's doing a better job?
You guys, because you're following the Brown Act,
He's not
as
even
far
going
as
to
I'm
answer the
concerned.
question, he's ready to run.
I'm ready to ask questions. You
I'm just
folks
kidding,
are.
please don't, please don't.
Don't start me on that one.
No, 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 no.
I see recalls, I see all kinds of things.
Oh, would you?
Bye.
Thank you.
Any other public comment? Anything on your table?
No, we've got a couple items coming up on a regular agenda on the 22nd, 24th, I believe it is, the next regular meeting as well as our meeting. It's taken a long time to slog through all of the comments and give them the, the consideration that are necessary on the land use element, but I hope to have it done by the end of next week, the 17th, so that you have it and so that we can have that for our next meeting on the general plan.
Thank you.
Just a lot of comments. One thing I wanted to point out to you.
Well, you're saying you're going to have it done by the end of next week.
Mm-hmm.
But
when we conclude our discussion on the background report, we can decide whether you want to have that added to the 24th agenda, or we want to carry it over to a special meeting. I guess it would be like the 4th of October or something like that, or whatever that 1st of October, I think it is. Since the 8th would be our regular meeting. So we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. One other thing I wanted to point out is we've had a lot of issue recently on codes, our zoning ordinance and things that we've discovered in the ordinance that we find frustrating and confusing. The ordinance allows the Planning Commission to initiate an ordinance amendment. And so if you find that you would like us to bring something back for consideration, you can bring that up to us and we can then agendize an item. So I just want to point that out to you that we've had a lot of discussion. That's something that you have the authority to initiate an ordinance amendment.
If it's properly agendized.
And basically what it would be at this time, we would like you to bring back this item. And so then we would agendize it, we would prepare a report, and that would provide the public with the understanding that this is something that's going to be on the agenda and we want to discuss further. In some cases, the board is already involved, and I would think that with medical marijuana, the board has already had a number of conversations, and it probably would be inappropriate for this body to say, well, we're going to take it on ourselves, when the board has said, we don't want to touch it right now. But on other issues, if there's things that you find that we really have some trouble with, it is within your purview to do that.
how I would like for that to be handled, and I think we've had this discussion a little bit before in connection with what I called spring cleaning events, hearings, where we, and this is what I would like your department to do, is to keep track of the ordinances that we're having problems with, collect them, and then my preference would be wait until the general plan, our role in the general plan is over with. While the board is dealing with it, we can go back and revisit some of these in a spring cleaning kind of a fashion and and address them, agendize them and address them. But I'd like your department to be tracking the ones that are.
We are.
Okay, fine. So at some point when the smoke clears on the other stuff, you can say, now we've got some time. Do you want to go after? You're going to ask us, do you want to go after these issues?
Yeah. There will be a comprehensive update to the zoning ordinance that's been identified as various implementation programs or measures from the general plan. But there may be issues that we want to address specifically now, rather than wait for that process to continue and then get into another lengthy process and an ordinance rewrite. I'm hoping we don't have to rewrite the whole thing, There are some things that we can fix immediately. There are going to be some things that are going to take some more time, and we'll have to, sort of look at the ordinance comprehensively to ensure that it is compatible and consistent with the general plan at the end.
Well, for example, what would be the problem with revisiting an ordinance in the middle of the application of that ordinance to a specific issue?
That would be problematic, and but I think that, let's take the asphalt plant as a classic example. If we were to suddenly change the rules, we say, okay, 035, we're going to revise that in some way. That's going to create some problems for the county as well as the applicant. I'm not sure what the ramifications of that would be. I would want to wait until that issue is fully resolved before we consider amending the ordinance. But there may be something else that we've addressed, we've resolved, and we said, okay, it's time to move forward on this.
Okay. Alternatively, you look at an ordinance and there's an application that's the ordinance is applicable to, before it hits us, you already anticipate this thing's a problem. It was poorly written, it's out of date, whatever your determination is. How appropriate would it be then to tell the applicant, look, my advice to the Planning Commission is going to be, let's look at this thing first before you make your application, because it's going to be a mess if we don't.
That probably makes sense. The way the law is written is that the time the application is deemed complete, the standards that are in place are the standards that apply to that project. So if the applicant is willing to wait to make the application until the ordinance is modified that may benefit that application, then that would be something that they may be willing to do.
Well, I mean, I know you're not.
Maybe I misunderstood.
When an applicant comes to you, you don't play favorites.
No.
Okay, but if you say you're going to be subject to this ordinance here, and these are the problems that you could come up against. Now, in your opinion, as the planning director, this ordinance is the degree to which it's subject to interpretation is very high, and that's going to cause some problems. In your opinion, the commission should look at that ordinance anyway, regardless of this application. That's almost.
I don't know that I would initiate or suggest that you initiate an ordinance amendment that would be for the purpose of assisting an individual project. But if there is something that we have had on our list of things, we need to fix this. This has been something we've needed to do before, and it's either imminent that we're going to get started on it or it's already in process. We might want to advise the applicant that if you wait until this ordinance is amended, it may be beneficial and maybe easier to get through the process.
Maybe or maybe not.
Or, again, we won't know until the board takes the final action what the outcome of the ordinance could be.
So obviously you currently have a list of ordinances that you've run across that you can see some language barriers or archaic issues that exist.
Yes.
You have that list. Is there anything on that list that you would like to see us request that we start looking at this on an agenda item, or do you want to wait till we get through the general plan updates?
No, there wasn't anything in particular that I was thinking about. I wanted to let you know that if that was a concern that you guys had, this has to be fixed. This is just creating so much problems. I mean, we know what some of those are.
So let's use the dispensary ordinance as an issue, as a point here. Are you saying that we could bring that forward on our agenda item and try to give some clarification for people like Gina that are working on these projects where there is some muddied water there and there is no clarity about a bus stop? Or is that something that we can actually do here and then it would be approved by the supervisors?
You could initiate the process.
Okay.
We would then undertake an ordinance revision process. It would go through the normal review process of, our analysis, bringing before the commission, recommendation to the board. I think that in the case of medical cannabis, the board is already involved in that issue.
Mhm.
And even though last April, they chose, not to change the ordinance with regard to cultivation.
Right.
There is ongoing discussion.
I'm not saying we take that on right now, I'm just using
I
that
don't- I
as
don't think- I
my
don't think that would be
example
an
because it's
appropriate
one
one,
area
yeah.
where there's some gray in there that could be
Yeah.
cleaned up. So I'm just using that as an
It's-
example.
But it
so-
is an example. And-
Okay.
And we could come across something else, in the future, and you could say, this really is confusing and it needs to be fixed. And-
Okay.
And we'd like you to bring back a resolution to initiate an ordinance amendment, and then start the process.
Well, that's good to know, because I would have thought it had to go to the supervisors, and we
Yeah.
couldn't initiate it here, so it's good to know. Thank you.
Welcome. That's all I had, a sort of a report.
No one has anything else?
But this commission could choose to consider an ordinance such as exists in Tuolumne and Stanislaus to ban cannabis altogether and leave it up to the board to agree or disagree with us. That's
You
not-
could do
that's
that.
not- That's not an edit to an existing
Yeah.
ordinance, that's,
You could say, the board has not addressed this issue. We're having a lot of problems at this level, and we believe staff needs to do this. Now, that could be overridden by the board, and I think that on some of these issues that have been at the board level, before the commission makes that action, I would at least, discuss with your appointer whether or not that would be a good idea. But you have the ability, you have the authority to initiate ordinance amendments on your own.
ordinances and amendments to ordinances.
Well, an ordinance amendment, yeah,
Either way.
either way. It's an ordinance. Yeah.
Okay.
It'd be an ordinance amending the zoning code.
Thank you.
Can I just, totally off topic, say something real quick?
By all means.
Okay. If I have a net Dropbox and I give you my access for that, can I get my meeting materials and I'll just use my iPad for that instead of printing them and mailing them up or delivering up to Arnold?
You just do it via email?
You can just do it via Dropbox. Do you know how to use that? So if the file's too large to email, you can put it in the Dropbox and then I can pull it down onto my computer and just have it here and save all this printing and mailing of documents.
Annette, I've been using that with our consultant, so we do have that capability.
Oh, we do? Okay,
So we
that
could
was
we
my
could do that.
Okay, I just think it would make it easier on everybody because I'm so far away trying to get these back and forth. It would just start using that. I'll work with you on that.
Okay.
Okay.
I think the Board of Supervisors ate up all the candy kisses that I bought a couple weeks ago.
Because they were fresh.
They've had a lot of meetings.
Yeah, they're not stupid.
Okay, if there's nothing else, we are adjourned.
Thank you.